2 years ago, I visited the town of Saalfeld in former East Germany, but the political climate has changed since I was last here. I recently returned to show a documentary I made about my Czech great-grandfather, who the Nazis forced to work in Saalfeld. But with far-right extremism again on the rise in Europe, I decided to see how this trend has impacted Saalfeld and the wider region of Thuringia, where the Nazis first gained real political power. It's been a busy year here with local government and European Parliament elections, but it's the upcoming regional election in September in which Germany's far-right populist party, the AfD, or Alternative for Deutschland, is expected to secure its first ever state victory.
Wäre eine Katastrophe. Rassistisch, menschenverachtend, überflüssig.
For the people that don't vote AfD, then I think there's real concern that they might win power in the state elections.
Saalfeld's marketplace may look quiet today, but in January, up to 1,500 demonstrators gathered here as a wave of anti-racism protests swept the nation, calling for the AfD to be banned. This widespread outrage came in response to a report published by undercover German journalists. This confirmed AfD party officials had attended a secret meeting with prominent German and Austrian neo-Nazis in Potsdam the previous November. The meeting, held 9 miles away from where the Nazis plotted the mass murder of Europe's Jewish population in 1942, discussed plans for the forced deportation of millions of immigrants and non-assimilated citizens from Germany, including those with German citizenship.
Weil ich glaube, der Grundtenor in der Bevölkerung wird immer aggressiver und die Leute werden immer perspektivloser und sie sehen da halt für sich eine Alternative, die ich nicht verstehen kann, aber ja, da mache ich mir schon sehr Sorgen.
Also ich würde mal übergeordnet sagen, wenn die AfD einen Landtag gewinnt, ist ja die Wahrscheinlichkeit, dass er auch in den Bundestag einzieht, in größerem Maßstab.
Ich bin entsetzt über diese ganze Entwicklung, was hier bei uns vorgeht. Die jungen Leute vor allem, in die Schulen sowohl, und ich kann das nicht verstehen.
But despite repeated scandals, the AfD has grown increasingly popular since it was first founded as a Eurosceptic party in 2013. It is the second most popular party in Germany and is currently leading the polls with 30% in Thuringia. To understand how the far-right scene has grown in Saalfeld, I spoke to radio journalist Amanda Hurley, who has lived in the town for the past 20 years.
What we're seeing in Saalfeld and Rudolstadt is about 1 in 3 people are voting for the AfD. We're a local radio station. We get our funding from the state government. There's a question mark for us if an AfD government comes into power, whether we would continue to receive the funding in the same way that we have.
The Thuringian AfD has been under surveillance by Germany's domestic intelligence service as a proven right-wing extremist case for years. Its reactionary policies towards mass migration, economic hardship, climate change, the pandemic, and the ongoing war in Ukraine have all gained strong support from voters dissatisfied with the main political parties.
It's something I've noticed in my 20 years in Saalfeld, that the faces of the people that you see walking down the street have changed, and it's become a lot more international. The AfD is very clear that they don't want to continue with what they call a welcomes culture. I do worry that a lot of these people might be sent away.
Monday demonstrations against COVID restrictions are still held every week in Saalfeld, with participants walking around the town to the beat of drums. But to understand why the AfD is so popular in Thuringia, we must look back 35 years to when the East German communist government collapsed at the end of the Cold War. Its 5 federal states are still among the poorest in Germany.
In the time when the two sides of Germany were brought back together, it was basically expected that the East would become the West and take on a lot of the ideas of the West. But a really, really big issue, it was after the wall came down in 1989, a lot of industry here was closed. We talk about something called the Treuhand, and it was a group of people that was brought in to basically reshape the whole industrial financial system here in this part of East Germany. A lot of people who had grown up with jobs forever were suddenly jobless. And I think this is the anger that we're seeing being brought into the society now. It's not perhaps gone away. It's not ever been properly dealt with.
The AfD's top candidate for state premier in Thuringia is Björn Hooker, a former history teacher. A German court ruled in 2019 that it was legally acceptable to call Hooker a fascist. He has twice been found guilty of using Nazi paramilitary slogans at his rallies, and he also drew wide backlash for his calls to change how Germany remembers its Nazi past. His extreme views have caused some members to leave the party. Hundreds of AfD supporters attended a recent rally in Saalfeld, where Hooker was speaking. A large counter-demonstration was organised in response. In this video, after repeated disruption from the anti-far-right coalition, Hooker appears to threaten the police.
Und bevor ich den erkläre, bitte ich die Polizei nochmal, den Angriff auf diese Versammlung hier einzustellen und bitte Paragraph 21 des Versammlungsgesetzes zu exekutieren. Nochmal, liebe örtliche Kräfte der Polizei, wenn das nicht funktioniert, bin ich danach auf der örtlichen Polizeidienststelle und mit mir 1000 Leute, die vor mir stehen.
The clip went viral and prompted fresh calls to ban the party. According to a report published by 2 research institutes in nearby Jena last November, the openness of far-right extremism in the Saalfeld-Rudolstadt district has caused this to become normalised and reduced the need for clandestine meeting places and recruitment tactics. Another group involved in the study was the Partnership for Democracy in the Saalfeld-Rudolstadt district. There are more than 300 partnerships in towns and cities across Germany. They receive state and federal funding to spread values of democracy and diversity through organising talks, workshops, and youth outreach work, a demographic particularly vulnerable to radicalisation and online misinformation. But the work they do could be under threat if the AfD gain power in September.
Also sollte es wirklich so weit kommen, was ich nicht hoffe und was ich auch nicht denke, dann wird es sehr wahrscheinlich so sein, dass die Gelder, weil unsere Arbeit finanziert sich auch über Fördermittel, und dass zumindest die Gelder, die wir vom Land Thüringen bekommen, dann gestrichen werden. Das ist also eins der Ziele, die die AfD verfolgt, weil sie natürlich Angst haben vor Demokratie, vor Mitbestimmung, vor Mitsprache von Bürgerinnen und Bürgern. Und sie wollen quasi alles das, was das fördert, also was wir machen, quasi kaputt machen, streichen. Und deswegen wären die Gelder vom Land dann für uns bestimmt nicht mehr zur Verfügung. Das wäre eine sehr große Einschränkung unserer Arbeit.
Thuringia is where Adolf Hitler's Nationalist Socialist Party first tested its ideas for dictatorship. It celebrated its first parliamentary victory in Thuringia after the state election in 1929. The following year, Wilhelm Frick became the first Nationalist Socialist politician to hold a ministerial position in a regional government. In 1932, the NSDAP won a landslide victory in Thuringia with more than 42% of the vote. Fritz Sauckel was elected state premier. A loyal follower to Hitler, Sauckel was the chief architect of the Nazis' forced and slave labour programme, which affected the lives of millions of Europeans, like my great-grandfather. The AfD is not the Nazi party, but is Thuringia in danger of echoing its far-right past? The AfD is unlikely to gain a majority, and even less likely to form a coalition, but as an opposition party, it could exert heavy influence on the democratic process. Residents in Thuringia will go to the polls on September the 1st and decide their future.